So a little while ago, I made a video talking about why we won't see a 4K Nintendo Switch anytime soon. And that video was kind of long, it kind of had a lot of rambling in it. So if I want to take that video and give you the main point of the argument that I was trying to make, here it is. Number one, it's not going to be cost effective for Nintendo to have a 4K console because first party and third party developers are all limited to the game cartridge, which is maxed at 32 gigabytes. So they would have to require the user, the player, to install more data onto their console or their external memory, which a 4K game, if you look on on PlayStation and Xbox, an install for those games could go anywhere between 50 gigabytes and like 75 gigabytes, depending on updates and DLC and everything else. So you gotta understand the fact that the Switch only has 32 gigabytes of internal memory, or 64 with the OLED model, and that's still not enough to put more than one 4K game on the Switch. You also have to understand that those game cartridges do cost more than a Blu-ray disc, and that's why they have the Switch tax. So the first party developers might just put those games in 4K because it's their company and it's Nintendo, whatever. But third party developers aren't going to pay extra to put their game on Switch in 4K when they can put it in 4K on consoles and PC. And the example I used in my last video was Mortal Kombat 11. You have to install, I think it was like 25 gigabytes extra aside from what the game already had on the card, because instead of getting the 32 gigabyte card, which does cost more, they go for the lower storage card, and then you install the rest on your console. Now again, if you have a regular Nintendo Switch with only 32 gigabytes internal, you may not be able to put one 4K game on there. And with the OLED model being 64 gigabytes, you might only be able to get one 4K game on that console without external memory. And the other problem is external memory at a higher gigabyte size costs a lot more. I paid about $100 for my 400 gigabyte card, and I still can't fit all of my games on that card. But that's alright, because I have a Switch Lite to play other games on there. So realistically, for a 4K console, it needs to come with about 500 internally, and you need to be able to get a terabyte externally, which, if you don't know, a lot of terabyte SD cards are not safe for your Switch. It overheats to the point where it burns a hole in the back of your console. I've seen videos of it, so that's another problem right there. Now, moving on from there, you also gotta figure the fact that the Switch would also need more RAM to run those games. Capcom themselves wanted the Nintendo to add more RAM to their console, as well as allowing developers to have access to all of that RAM, because Capcom wanted to use the RE engine on the Switch, which could mean we could have gotten Resident Evil 7 and 8 and any other future Resident Evils on Switch. The only game that I can think of right now that is running RE engine on Switch is Monster Hunter Rise, and I only say that one because I don't know if Monster Hunter Stories 2 is using the RE engine, but Rise is using the RE engine, and it looks phenomenal for a Switch game. It can look a lot better than it does, and that's probably going to happen when it releases on PC next year. So what's the point of all this? Well, I found a bunch of articles today talking about Nintendo coming out and saying that they have no future plans for another Switch hardware upgrade. And basically the OLED model is the final hardware upgrade for the Nintendo Switch. The article was very brief, at least this one is from Yahoo Finance, is very brief, and it just says that they have no plans to release more hardware updates for the Switch. Now, what that means is, and I've said this before, the OLED model is our Switch Pro, and all it does is upgrade the experience for handheld gameplay. There's really no experience upgrade for docked gameplay. The only upgrade for playing docked is the built-in Ethernet port, which for me doesn't matter because I have an Ethernet adapter anyway. And I also don't play online games that often on Switch, because let's be honest, online Switch is not a good thing. The only other upgrade besides that is the internal memory being 64 gigabytes. But again, if you have a Switch, you most likely have an external SD card. If you don't use an external SD card with your Switch, you're either not playing enough games or you're just not bright enough to do that. I don't know. But they also go in to talk about the profit margins for the OLED model, and there was rumors and statements that the OLED model was going to further increase the Nintendo's profit margins. But in the article, it does also share that that's been false. They came out and said it's false. They don't expect any much of an increase in their profit margin for the OLED model, which then makes me wonder, why make the console if you're not expecting to see a huge profit off of it? It makes it seem like they're losing money by adding the extra $50 cost for this console, which again, why even do it? Why not just not do the OLED model and just try to make a better console that has more RAM? Like a Switch Pro, there's this whole myth about the Pro console has to be 4K because the PS4 Pro is 4K. I don't think that's the case. I think a Pro model could mean it's the much better version of the console. In the case of the Switch, a Pro Switch could be more RAM, like more RAM, pretty much more RAM, so that developers can have more flexibility to put their games on the Switch. There's some videos out there by different developers, indie developers, and they're saying that the problem with putting games on the Switch, porting games on the Switch, is how much they have to cut back to make it work. Mortal Kombat looks terrible on the Switch. The Witcher had to take a lot of cutbacks to put on the Switch. And those are for, there's games that are ported that either need an extra install or don't. Tony Hawk needed about 10 gigabytes of install. Like I said, Mortal Kombat needed about 25 gigabytes install. LA Noire needed about 20, I believe, or 15 to 20 gigabytes of install. And it's hard for companies to put their games on Switch because of the limited RAM that they have to work with. And it means that we are going to see less and less ports on the Switch because you have PS5 and Series X that can run games at incredible graphics and frame rates, and those games aren't going to be able to go on Switch. If they do, they're going to be cloud versions. We have like 3 cloud version games in North America, and there's Resident Evil 7 is a cloud game in Japan, which you can download it from the Japan eShop, but it ain't going to run. You just can't do it. So the whole point to make here is that there's not going to be a 4K Switch, and if anyone is still thinking about that, still hoping for it, it's not going to happen. No 4K Switch. They can't make the 4K Switch possible while keeping the cost low, and they don't have any interest in making the cost high. They said themselves they don't expect profits from the Switch OLED. So realistically, the OLED model is only an upgrade for handheld, which means if you have a Switch Lite and you want to get the OLED for handheld, you're better off trading in your Switch Lite towards the OLED. You'll get more trading credit from GameStop if you do. There really is no point in an OLED model if you are a docked gamer and you have another Switch that is dockable. And there's no point in hoping for a 4K Switch. You're going to have to wait for the Switch 2 or the Nintendo, whatever it's going to be called. And the final point here is that I've mentioned this before, and I mentioned it to a few friends of mine, is that you have a Switch that's dockable, desktop mode, and handheld, and the Switch Lite is only handheld. So I was, had this this prediction of like, what if the Switch 4K was only dockable? You can't take it off the dock, or it's just like a box, and you can't make it portable, and that'll be how it could run 4K. It'll make sense considering how they went with the Switch and the Switch Lite, but they're all about portability, taking your games with you, which is also why we're not going to get a 4K Switch. Even they recently announced a Steam handheld. I forgot what it's called, but Steam has a handheld console coming out this October as well. Either October or December it's releasing, but end of the year is releasing, and it plays your PC games from Steam, and it works as a desktop. You can plug it to a monitor and use it as a full working desktop, and it plays your PC games in handheld at full settings, but it's only going to be maxed at 720p. So if Steam can't make a 4K handheld, Nintendo's not going to make a 4K handheld. And the fact that the Steam console is only going to cost, I think the cheapest one is $400, and it's going to have like the lowest internal memory of 64 gigabytes, I believe. But you can also add external memory, and it probably will support the terabyte micro SD, and it can play much better games, arguably much better games than the Nintendo Switch can. But that's my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was longer than I wanted it to be, but I'll leave links to the articles in my description below so you can read them more. And hopefully this brings up more discussion for you guys, and we can talk more about it in the comments and hope for Nintendo's future, because they are they're way behind and they need to pick up the pace. I will see you guys next time.